Live from the heart of Lincoln, America.
Welcome to Ticket Weeknights
On 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com.
Hello, welcome into basketball postgame from Nebraska right here on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com. I'm Ben Droz. I'm just running the ones and twos, and joined on the stream, who was at the game, is Austin Warman. Austin, how are you doing tonight?
In here, appreciate you being back there running the ones and twos. How are things at 10:40?
Things are doing great here. It's weird. I'm still not used to the time change where it's dark at like 5 o'clock. It's still just really weird to me when I'm working nights that it's dark this early. But, you know, I'm doing all right, Austin. But let's get right into it. Nebraska beat North Florida pretty handily. You were there at the game. What are your initial takeaways from it?
One of the best, if not the best, overall offensive performance by Nebraska in the Fred Hoiberg era. Pretty complete from start to finish. The way that the Huskers score the ball, right? I think North Florida is, at the end of the year, we're going to look back and say it's going to be in the running for, if not the actual worst defense that Nebraska faced all year. But here's the thing. We've seen other Nebraska teams struggle in those situations, right? This is a North Florida team that came in gunning from three, right? It's what they've done. It's what their identity is. And Nebraska didn't necessarily fall into that trap, right? On the game, the Ospreys, not Ospreys, Ospreys, take 43 three-pointers, right? Previous Nebraska teams try to get into a shootout with teams like this. This Nebraska team didn't. Nebraska owned a huge advantage in points in the paint. 58 of the 103 points come in the paint. What that tells me, Ben, is that Nebraska didn't settle, right? 22 assists on 40 made field goals. Compare the 22 assists to only 6 turnovers. The story of the game is going to be that Nebraska put up 50 points in each half. Defense wasn't perfect, but a lot of that is just because of the style that North Florida plays, right? Making 14 threes is going to drive some point totals up. Huskers did a good job of closing out for the most part, of contesting. North Florida missed some open ones early, but this Nebraska team offensively stayed true to the game plan it needed to stick to find a way to win this game against an opponent that's given some other high major teams fits in their home arenas. That they didn't tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it was you would think, if just looking at the opponent, that, oh man, this isn't that impressive of a win. I mean, but it was the offense that I feel like, if some people have, questions about this team, it was on the offensive side of the ball. And yeah, North Florida is not a great defensive team, as you said, might be one of the worst defensive teams Nebraska faces all year. But I still feel like anytime you can put up over 100 points on an opponent is a good day for your team.
It absolutely is, and especially because of the way that Nebraska did it. They moved the ball. They didn't settle. They didn't get into a one-on-one battle at all. It was a game where a lot of different guys scored, right? Connor Essegian only misses 2 shots. He has 22 points on 10 shots, 6 of 8 from 3 in just 21 minutes. Bryce Williams was really good again. Jawan Gary did his job pretty well. Aaron Eulis, his first double-digit effort of the season. And Andrew Morgan had 13 points. He probably could have been over 20, but he missed some layups that he wants back. Also only went 3 of 6 at the free throw line. You also get a couple dunks out of Braxton Mia, Sam Hoiberg, a couple layups and a 3. You get Cale Jacobson with an and 1 as well. It was contributions up and down the roster, especially offensively. Gavin Griffiths, it looks like he struggled a little bit, but he has 4 rebounds and 2 assists. That's a guy I think Nebraska needs to get going, a guy that's played plenty of Big Ten basketball in his career, right? He played a year for Steve Pikiell at Rutgers. So you can see that impact of playing for Steve Pikiell, and that Gavin Griffiths is a good basketball player just because he's still doing the little things. He's not moping, not pouting when the shots aren't falling. But again, another difference between this Nebraska team and maybe teams in years past, Nebraska had 5 guys in double figures tonight. Easy to do when you go over 100 points. Nebraska hasn't always had this sort of balance, right? Especially against a team, I'm going to keep going back to it, like North Florida, where it's so easy to fall into the trap of hero ball. They hit a 3, you miss a shot, they hit another 3. Okay, we got to go get it all back in a hurry. Nebraska didn't. They did a great job of spreading the ball around, finding the right matchup tonight, attacking it, and they end the game shooting 58% from the floor, 40 out of 69. So, again, one of the most well-rounded offensive performances out of a Nebraska team in the entire Fred Hoiberg era.
Yeah, I mean, looking at specific individual contributions, I mean, Connor Essegian is kind of the name that pops out. He had 22 points, 8 of 10 from the field, 6 of 8 from the 3-point line. That's what Nebraska needs, is his 3-point shooting. If he can, I mean, he's probably not going to be shooting 6 of 8, that's over 50% all year long. But if he can get anywhere near, that 40% for the 3-point mark, I mean, he would be a valuable contributor to this team.
He already is a valuable contributor.
Yeah.
What we see is that if North Florida recognizes this, Big Ten opponents are going to recognize this now. I'm going to get the slight negative out of the way before we get to a lot of the positive, right? The negative is that teams are going to identify when Connor Essegian is the low man in help and go right at him at the rim. They would do that with any guard, but Connor Essegian, still not a great defender, not a lockdown defender by any means. He can defend in a team concept well enough. The teams are going to target him defensively. So where is the test for Connor Essegian going to be? Can he maintain this level of offensive consistency in Big Ten play? The guy whose role I think he's filling for the most part right now is not Keisei Tominaga. It's CJ Wilcher. Yep. Right. Essegian is a bench piece. He started today because Berke Boyukengel was out. Essegian was the one that took the spot of Braxton Mia when he missed that game earlier in the year as well. So Essegian is that fifth and a half man, the fifth starter in an emergency, but the first guy off the bench, kind of like CJ Wilcher was. What CJ Wilcher didn't do at Nebraska was be consistent, right? Good player, good team concept guy again. But CJ Wilcher had huge contributions against Purdue in the win over Wisconsin, the top 10 wins here at Pinnacle Bank Arena last year. But then after that, he pretty much disappeared, right? Played minutes, but didn't play impactful minutes. That's going to be the challenge for Connor Essegian, right? Nebraska is using him in a lot of same ways, in a lot of the same baseline out of bounds plays, in the same sort of actions, at least big picture actions that they did with CJ Wilcher. CJ was fine. I think it was best for both sides that they went their separate ways. Essegian's got a little more athleticism to him. He's got a little bit better handle off the bounce, right? He can make a few more plays, but he's kind of in between CJ Wilcher and Keisei Tominaga. I saw there was someone saying Nebraska might have upgraded from Keisei Tominaga. No, we're not going to go there. We're not going to do that. That's just plain and simple not true, at least right now. What Connor Essegian can do, though, is the same thing Keisei Tominaga can do in terms of getting a team going, right? We saw it against Creighton. We saw it against South Dakota. Dude's got a burner. We heard Fred Hoiberg say that. And this is a guy that shot lights out as a freshman, scuffled a little bit shooting the ball last year at Wisconsin as a sophomore. And if he's not going to be shooting the ball well, he's probably not going to be on the floor, right? He doesn't bring a whole lot of ball handling. Keisei Tominaga was a better passer than Connor Essegian. It's not to say Essegian's bad by any means, but if teams are going to force a guy on Nebraska to beat them off the dribble, it's going to be Connor Essegian, right? They're going to start running him off the 3-point line as best as they can. He'll probably make the right decision. He's had some wayward passes. So I think teams in the Big Ten especially are going to be comfortable running Connor Essegian off the 3-point line and saying, we will not let you beat us from 3. You will beat us in the mid-range, or you will beat us by being a distributor and finding guys. That's going to be the next step for him, because in terms of scoring the basketball, got pretty much no questions. He's done it in the non-con. He's done it in the Big Ten before. But teams are going to start to adjust as Nebraska gets into its first 2 conference games of the year coming up next, on the road at Michigan State, back home for Indiana. What Connor Essegian has done for Nebraska in the non-conference is huge, being a spot starter. Let's see how he and Nebraska handle how conference teams adjust to him.
I mean, Connor Essegian was the big-time name coming out of the game, but what was kind of the name, in your opinion, that maybe kind of went under the radar? There was a huge impact player for Nebraska in this game.
Like I said, there's contributions up and down the roster, right? Raleigh Wooster, 4 points on 4 shots, 2 rebounds, 3 assists in only 16 minutes. Nebraska didn't need a lot of him tonight because they were up so much. Aaron Eulis is going to get some headlines, easily his best game as a Husker. Obviously, you notice the 10 points on 4 of 7, 3 assists. He did a great job running the show. Pretty darn good job defensively as well, I would say. Sam Hoiberg, similar sort of thing. When it's all said and done, Hoiberg plays 15 minutes. Eulis ends up playing 22. But Nebraska had both those guys in the game at the same time for pretty long stretches. They're active defenders. They're good communicators. So I think more so than any player, Ben, what I'm going to say the kind of the underrated headline of the game is Nebraska's defensive communication here tonight, right? We know Nebraska, this team wants to hang its hat on the defensive end. We've heard that from Coach Hoiberg. We've heard that from the players. The shot comes and go. Defense is supposed to travel, all that good stuff. This is a new sort of offense, right? They shoot more threes than anyone in the Big Ten has in a long time, and they do it in a different way than, say, Illinois, one of the higher volume three-point shooting teams in the Big Ten. There were some moments on defense for Nebraska where North Florida's action, having 3-4 guys running around at the same time, would have confused younger teams or quieter teams. I thought Nebraska, 95% of the time tonight did a great job communicating through switches, passing off assignments, making sure they were on the same page. Not to say North Florida didn't get any open shots. Certainly they did. Hit a couple of them, missed a couple of them, especially early. But tonight was an encouraging sign. You hold North Florida to a season low in points. Their previous season low was 74, and their season opening win on the road at South Carolina. I had some questions about Nebraska's defense, how it'd be able to hang on the perimeter. Would North Florida run enough action? Would they be quicker than Nebraska? Or would Nebraska's length and ability to be physical with guards, keep them in front on the perimeter, come into play? Nebraska did a great job of not allowing blow-by drives that lead to drive and kick threes or drive, kick, extra pass threes. And a lot of that was due to the communication.
On free throws, when I'm just looking at the stats, on free throws, Nebraska is 12 of 18. It seems like, the free throw shooting isn't bad, but it seems that it maybe has regressed a little bit from last year, or are you not seeing it that way, I guess?
No, I'm not. It was just kind of a weird night, right? Nebraska played a much more free-flowing game, not nearly as many fouls and whistles as we've seen in years past. Shooting it better from the perimeter certainly meant Nebraska didn't have to go downhill as much. And a lot of the fouls came early before Nebraska was shooting bonus free throws. Only 12 of 18 at the line. I believe 18 free throws is a season low for Nebraska. They didn't have to rely on it today, but Bryce Williams, 3 of 3, no worries about him. Juwan Gary, 3 of 4. You take that. The issue was the big guys, right? Braxton Mia and Andrew Morgan both shoot 50%. Morgan was 3 of 6 at the line for a guy that's a 2/3, 66% to 70% free throw shooter for his career. Braxton Mia, 1 of 2 at the line, like I said. Jacobson made his one after the layup he was fouled on, and Aaron Eulis went only 1 of 2 at the free throw line. So it was probably the biggest sore spot for Nebraska tonight, was only shooting 66% on free throws, but they only get there 18 times. And the guys that missed the shots are, yes, guys that are going to play minutes for this team in Morgan and Mia. It didn't kill Nebraska, and those guys won't be taking the bulk of the foul shots when we get into conference play. So for me, Ben, that's just kind of a blip on the radar, more so than anything to be concerned about. I do want to throw this out here too, Ben. Early in the year, we saw Nebraska get off to some slow starts, and that's something that Fred Hoiberg and his staff preached to this team throughout the week, was find a way to get off to a fast start. Letting a team like this hang around, letting them get hot from 3 and stay in the game, that's what allowed them to beat South Carolina. It's what allowed them to beat Georgia Tech, both of those on the road, and even hang with Georgia. It was key for Nebraska, Ben, to start 3 of 3 from 3. Before the U16 timeout in the first half, Bryce Williams hit a 3, Connor Essegian hit a 3, and Juwan Gary hit a 3. Contrast that with the Ospreys, only 1 of 6 from 3 in the first 4 minutes, and 2 of 12 before they took the U12 timeout. That was huge, right? Teams like this, we see, upset-minded teams, especially ones with some confidence like North Florida, come in, play the role of spoiler because they punch first, right? You don't often see teams like this come back. They have the ability to, because of how often and how well they shoot the 3. But it was key for North Florida in its other road games to set the tone for the game, say you are playing our style of game. Ben, I want to credit Nebraska for not falling into that trap, for dictating the terms of engagement. And Nebraska starting hot from 3, maybe put even a little bit more pressure on North Florida to hit some of those early shots to try to keep pace. They weren't able to do it. Nebraska builds a big lead and never really looks back.
Another stat that I'm looking at that's very, eye-opening. Nebraska had 12 steals in the game. Sam Hoiberg had 4 of those steals. I mean, just active hands. I feel like that's kind of been a theme this year. I feel like Nebraska's been really good forcing a lot of those turnovers, especially getting a lot of steals this year.
Yeah, Nebraska gets those 12 steals out of 5 guys, right? Esijan has a couple of them. You look at Gavin Griffiths with a couple of them, Cale Jacobson with a couple of them as well. And 2 blocks for Jacobson as well. I'm curious to know how it was scored on the one that he just ripped away from the North Florida player right underneath the Ospreys basket. That was a big moment late in the game, got the crowd going again. Fred Hoiberg was not prompted to talk about that, but ended up bringing it up. If he wasn't going to, I was going to ask him about it. The steals that Aaron Eulis and Sam Hoiberg had, they're part of the defense, but they're tough plays to make because of how Nebraska runs that defensive scheme, right? When a player drives baseline like that, you want to take away the reverse option, right? If you want to make a team reverse the ball, you want them to go station to station, corner to wing to top of the key or whatever, and then hope that you can get back, force him to drive back into traffic. We saw Nebraska avoid that with a great play by Raleigh Wooster. He drove baseline and then basically just cut the line, skipped the pass right back out to, I believe it was Esijan for a 3. North Florida didn't have the ball handlers to do that, didn't have the vision to do that. So the one pass available to them when they drove baseline was the pass to the opposite corner of where they came from. What Aaron Eulis and Sam Hoiberg did was scouting report based, and it's 2 guys that have to make their living doing that on the defensive end, right? Their job is to get to the corner, to contest that shot or contest the drive. Those guys went a step beyond, right, of getting there even a step or 2 sooner, stealing the ball. And for the most part, those kick-started transition opportunities for Nebraska. Those are the simple play. You love it if your guys can make them, but it's a long closeout. It takes a long time, even for Division I athletes, to get all the way down that deep in the corner, because North Florida had really good spacing all day long. It's what a shooting offense like theirs thrives on. That's a long run. That is a long closeout. If just use the NFL example or the college football example, if you're a quarterback and you're looking through a zone, right, is essentially what that is. You have multiple options there. You've come off that read kind of in the middle of the field or the middle of the court. You're looking down to that one option on the baseline there. More often than not, that's a completion, right? You might not get many yards after catch in this example, but that's often a completion, right? A lot of teams will get that pass off just because it's the only one available and because it takes a long time for the guards to communicate what their rotation is and, think ahead really and get down there. That's what led to those steals from Aaron Eulis and Sam Hoiberg. And they ended up, for the most part, turning into points for Nebraska. 25 points off of turnovers for Nebraska. I mean, most of them came in transition, but Nebraska did a good job too of recognizing when it had numbers and when it didn't. Sometimes they got layups at the rim. I think there was one that Cale Jacobson pushed ahead and open, let 2 guys cut past him, didn't force the pass, knew he had the trailing Connor Esijan for a left wing 3 in the first half. Credit Aaron Eulis and Sam Hoiberg for spearheading that defensive effort and creating live ball takeaways.
Up next on Nebraska's schedule is Michigan State, their first Big Ten game of the season this Saturday at Michigan State. I mean, Nebraska, as they go into conference play, is there anything that you're still concerned about with this team that, I mean, I know this game might not give you any more concerns. Very good performance by Nebraska, but just what about heading into conference play now? What question marks do you still have about this team?
Well, to me, the question is still about the ceiling. And some people might question that it's a team that only lost by 3 on a neutral site to St. Mary's and went on the road and beat Creighton. If this Nebraska team shows up like it did tonight offensively, it completely changes the game. I still want to see Nebraska get more and more consistent on the offensive end, right? I still think that there will be times this year where the outside shot isn't falling and teams are pretty good at making life difficult for Nebraska on the perimeter. I want to see how they respond, right? On a night that Connor Esijan isn't shooting well, can Bryce Williams take over and stay in control of the game offensively for Nebraska until someone else gets it going? Can Nebraska play through the post, right? I don't think Braxton Mee is a traditional post-up big man in volume, but from time to time, Nebraska can sure give him a look. Andrew Morgan, how is he going to finish at the rim? Can Nebraska play through him potentially in the high post and the low post? And really, to me, Ben, the story of this Nebraska team will be written by how the secondary, bottom of the scouting report, such as they are, guys come to play. I still don't buy Juwan Gary as an ISO player. Nebraska's run a play or two for him pretty much every game. I just don't think that's a way to be successful consistently on offense, right? Sure, there are going to be times if Bryce Williams on the bench or Juwan Gary is the only starter in the game that you'll need him to go get a bucket. I just don't think that's Juwan Gary's strength. So to me, the biggest question is, can Nebraska's lineups without a Bryce Williams, or if Connor Seaton is struggling, can those lineups survive 4-minute stretches is essentially what it'll come down to. Can those groups dig their heels in defensively where even if the shots aren't falling on offense, I have questions about some of the offensive consistency. On nights that the shots aren't falling, can that second group tread water? And on the flip side of that, can the starters or can Nebraska's best offensive group consistently defend enough, right? Nebraska can't afford to get in holes and then put the second unit in consistently, right? If the starters are playing even, the second group has to find a way to maintain that. If other teams' benches score better than Nebraska's does, the Huskers are going to have some trouble. So I'm going to be curious to monitor, especially against a team like Michigan State, the hallmark of that team under Tom Izzo, rebound and run. Or even if Nebraska makes a shot, get it out of the rim and run. We saw it here at Pinnacle Bank Arena just last year in the 77-70 Husker win, I believe it was. Michigan State is still fast. I don't think it's a vintage Michigan State team, but they pushed Kansas pretty well in the Champions Classic, and they also beat a North Carolina team that's struggling to find its identity right now. But if you'd asked me before the year who's the better team, I go with Carolina. Maybe Izzo, hasn't lost the fastball like I thought he had. It's going to be a well-coached team. It's going to be a disciplined team. I have my own concerns about Michigan State, but they know who they are. They know what they want to do, and they're going to do it very well. We're starting to see Nebraska come into that identity. Now it's time to see how well it holds up in Big Ten conference play for a couple games.
So when talking about the ceiling of this team, you might have already kind of answered it, but so is your concern about the ceiling more, the second unit and the guys around kind of the top players on the team, or do you feel like this team doesn't have enough top talent? Like your concerns are more with like Bryce Williams or Juwan Gary be able to take over games?
Can I say all of the above? Because I don't want to discredit any of the guys, right? Do not get me wrong. Mm-hmm. I think that Nebraska, again, has played really well over the last few games of the non-conference season. I think they're starting to find themselves. But there's going to come adversity. Where do I think that adversity is likely to come from? I think it's going to come more often than not on the offensive end, right? Nebraska is going to play teams with guys that can go get a bucket maybe a little bit better than, say, Bethune-Cookman or Fairleigh Dickinson. I don't think Nebraska is going to rattle off many 20-4 runs in the last 4 minutes in Big Ten play like they did against Rio Grande Valley to start the year. So this team has to continue to move without the ball, to not get stagnant. That's how they're going to create good shots, right? Bryce Williams is a Big Ten bucket getter. Can he be the go-to guy for Nebraska for a 20-game conference season? We'll have to see, right? Connor Seaton has played Big Ten basketball, but he's been up and down in his career. Can he step it up in the consistency? Back to Williams for a sec, right? He can do it. How will he hold up physically? Not injury concerns, but that's a lot of wear and tear, a lot of bump and grind that he's going to end up taking for this team if things get bogged down. I think Nebraska, for the most part, does want to slow down and execute in the half court. So, I still have some questions about the bench. Will that unit be able to score enough or defend well enough to not have to score necessarily? But I do still have that top-end talent question, Ben. I do, because I can't get out of my head what it looked like last year when Nebraska got run off the floor in the second half by Illinois in the Big Ten tournament, and then by Wade Taylor IV and company down at Texas A&M. Nebraska got big, right? This is a big team in terms of positional size, but we've seen Fred Hoiberg's team handle teams with a dominant post player better than they have a team with a dominant guard or ball handler, right? Think about what Illinois did. Do they have Terrence Shannon this year? No, they don't. They do have a guy by the name of Kasparas Jakushonis who's really good. He's going to be a one-and-done NBA player. You think about what Texas A&M did with a Wade Taylor IV. Trey Holloman's not that, but we'll see. UCLA is going to have some guards. How does Bryce Williams, the senior, hold up against a guy that's, his frame or maybe even slightly thicker in Dylan Harper, the freshman at Rutgers, right? If the other team has a dominant back-to-the-basket big man, a la Zach Edey, a la Ryan Kalkbrenner, we know what Nebraska's game plan is going to be, right? Pack the paint, make the supporting cast beat Nebraska from the outside. When the other team is led by a guard, a la Jakushonis, a la Harper, even, throw Boo Buie and Ty Berry into that conversation for Northwestern. We'll see about Wisconsin and John Tonji, how real he is, the pride of Omaha Central. That is also what gives me some pause, is that Nebraska still doesn't have that true guard stopper, right? Gary can be a wing stopper. He can play bigger than he is, and he can hang on the perimeter. Will he do it for 40 minutes? Bryce Williams, fine defender, but you don't want to stick him on another team's best player if you can help it. Sam Hoiberg could defend the heck out of Jameer Young a couple years ago. Bigger guys, he's going to compete his butt off. That's best I can say. Same with Aaron Eulis. What Nebraska needs is a guy that's in that 6'3" to 6'5" range, that's just jump out of the gym athletic, that's quick, that's fast, that's strong. It's a hard guy to get to Nebraska, right? Not exactly a hotbed of hoops, talent, or recruiting. But until Nebraska has a guy like that, or proves that its team defense concept can hold up against a player like that consistently, that's where I'm going to have a little bit of pause for this team. But then there's the flip side of this. Maybe Nebraska is going to be able to dictate how games are played more so than I would have thought coming into the year. I still don't know if this is what Fred Hoiberg designed or wanted, but I do know that Fred Hoiberg is a really good basketball coach that can make a lot of different things work. So if Nebraska can continue to take the fight to other teams and say, you are playing our style, that's the mark of a good team. It's great to be able to counterpunch, but what Nebraska needs to start doing to, I think, take that next step as a program is get better at throwing that first punch. Say, this is who we are. This is what we do. You will make your adjustment to us. We make the first move. You adjust to us. That, to me, will determine how far this Nebraska team goes to.
Real quick, last question before we sign off for postgame. Just quick thoughts about Nebraska's upcoming opponent in Michigan State.
Michigan State fascinates me, man. I don't think we can do the whole January, February Izzo thing like John Rothstein wants to do necessarily, but they're good, right? Tom Izzo's one of the best to ever do it. They're 6-2 this year. Again, their losses have been to Kansas. They lose by 8 points against a much better roster. They also lose in Maui, their second game, by 8 points to a Memphis team that no one has ever questioned the talent. I question how that team wins games because of all the off-court drama, right? They're balanced. Jaden Akins has stepped up a little bit, 12-5-2 on the year for him. Frankie Fiddler, the transfer from Omaha, the Bellevue West native, a bit of a free throw merchant right now, but he's proven he can hang to some degree at the Big Ten level. Jace Richardson is an X factor for them. Cohen Carr can jump out of the gym. I still really don't like what Michigan State is doing in the post. Kohler doesn't necessarily scare me. Carson Cooper, nah. Simon DePaula, no. Xavier Booker thinks he's a 3-man when he should be playing the 5. It's going to be a guard-dominated game if Michigan State's going to win it. So we'll see. Can Bryce Williams hold up defensively? Can Raleigh Wooster slow down the tempo and get Nebraska into it? I think Michigan State is maybe a little better than I gave him credit for early, but I don't think that this is a team that's anything more than a 7 seed in the NCAA tournament. Nebraska won't be favored, but I don't think Michigan State is going to be a huge favorite come Saturday in East Lansing either.
All right, sounds good. Austin, thank you as always for joining us on postgame. We're going to throw it over to Bach now, who's got his nighttime shows coming up, starting with Chris for the 6 o'clock hour. But until then, we're out of here. Next Nebraska game is again Saturday against Michigan State. But until then, we will see you later.
It's the fall sports season, and that means that the school year is back in session and you're planning road trips for Nebraska football games and following your kids around to their different events.